Have you ever noticed that God sometimes feels the quietest when you need Him the most? Not when life is easy, not when everything is working, but when your heart is breaking, when the door closes, when the prayer goes unanswered, when the future feels uncertain. That's often when heaven seems silent. And if you're honest, maybe you've asked a question you've never said out loud. God, where are you? You prayed, you trusted, you waited, and then you waited some more. Days became weeks, weeks became months, maybe even years. The situation didn't improve, the relationship didn't heal, the opportunity never came, the burden never lifted. And somewhere along the way, disappointment started whispering, maybe God isn't listening, maybe God doesn't care, maybe God moved on, maybe He forgot me. Most Christians know the right answers. We know we're supposed to trust God. We know He's faithful. We know His promises. But knowing those truths and feeling them are not always the same thing. Because when God feels silent, faith becomes difficult. Not because you stop believing He exists, but because you start wondering if He's still involved. And that's what makes silence so painful. Not the absence of noise, the fear of abandonment. If you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. Even David felt it. The same David who defeated Goliath. The same David who wrote songs of worship. The same David God called a man after His own heart. Listen to his words in Psalm 13. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? Think about that. David wasn't talking to strangers, he was talking to God, and he wasn't pretending everything was fine. He was confused, he was hurting, he felt forgotten. The Bible does something remarkable. It doesn't hide those emotions, it records them, because God knows what it feels like to wait. Now think about Joseph. God gave Joseph a dream, a promise, a glimpse of his future. Then everything fell apart. His brothers betrayed him, he was sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. And for years there was silence, no explanation, no timeline, no reassurance. Imagine being Joseph. You know God gave you a dream, yet your reality looks nothing like that promise. Every day in prison must have felt like evidence that God forgot. But here's what Joseph couldn't see. While he was waiting, God was working. Every closed door, every delay, every setback, every disappointment. God was weaving together a story Joseph could not yet understand. And when the time was right, everything changed. The silence had never been abandonment, it had been preparation. Then there's Job, a man who lost almost everything. His wealth, his health, his children, his security, his peace. One tragedy after another crashed into his life, and after all that pain came something even harder. Silence. Job cried out for answers. He demanded explanations. He searched for understanding, and for a long time, heaven seemed quiet. Have you ever been there? Not looking for comfort, not asking for blessings, just wanting God to explain why. Yet no answer comes. That kind of silence can shake a person, but Job's story teaches something important. God's silence never meant God's absence. Even when Job couldn't see Him, even when Job couldn't hear Him, God was still present, watching, working, sustaining. This is where many of us make a mistake. We assume no answer means no God, no movement means no purpose, no breakthrough means no plan. But Scripture keeps showing us the opposite. God often works in places we cannot see, under the surface, behind the scenes, in ways our limited perspective cannot understand. The problem is that we judge God's activity by our visibility. If we can't see it, we assume it isn't happening. But that's not how God works. One of the most powerful examples is Lazarus. Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus. Their brother was dying. They expected Jesus to come immediately. Anyone would. But Jesus delayed. He stayed where He was. And from their perspective, the silence made no sense. Days passed. Lazarus died. The situation became impossible. Imagine how that felt. They knew Jesus could heal him. They knew He cared. So why wasn't He coming? Why the delay? Why the silence? Why the waiting? But Jesus wasn't ignoring them. He was preparing something greater than they imagined. Because when He finally arrived, He didn't just heal Lazarus, He raised him from the dead. The delay was not proof of indifference. The delay was part of the miracle. What if that's true for you right now? What if the silence is not punishment? What if the waiting is not rejection? What if the delay is not abandonment? What if God is doing something beneath the surface that you simply cannot see yet? Think about a seed buried in the ground. From above, it looks dead. Nothing appears to be happening. No growth, no progress, no movement. But beneath the soil, life is developing. Roots are forming. Strength is growing. Preparation is happening. The silence above ground hides the activity below it. And many spiritual seasons work exactly the same way. While you see waiting, God may be building trust. Because trust grows when answers don't. While you see delay, God may be developing character. Because character is often formed in hidden places. While you see silence, God may be preparing something larger than your current understanding can hold. Remember Joseph. Remember David. Remember Job. Remember Lazarus. Again and again, Scripture shows that God often does His deepest work during the seasons that feel the quietest. So what do you do when God feels silent? First, keep praying. Not because prayer forces God to move, but because prayer keeps your heart connected to Him. Second, stay in Scripture. Feelings change, circumstances change, but God's truth remains. Third, remember what God has already done. The same God who carried you before is still carrying you now. And fourth, do not build your theology from your emotions. Build it from God's promises. Because emotions are real, but emotions are not always reliable. God never promised you would always feel His presence. But He did promise He would never leave you. The greatest proof that God has not abandoned you is not that you feel Him, it's that He promised He wouldn't. Jesus said, "I am with you always." Not sometimes, not only when life makes sense, always. When you're strong, when you're weak, when you're confident, when you're afraid. When heaven feels close, and when heaven feels silent. Maybe God feels silent today. Maybe you're still waiting, still praying, still hoping, still wondering, and maybe you don't have answers yet. That's okay. Neither did Joseph, neither did David, neither did Job, neither did Martha, but their stories remind us of something powerful. Silence is not abandonment. The author is still writing, the builder is still working, the shepherd is still leading, even when you cannot hear his voice. And one day you may look back and discover that what felt like silence was actually God preparing something you couldn't see at the time. So don't quit. Don't walk away. Don't mistake silence for absence. Because God is often doing His greatest work behind the scenes, and even now, He has not forgotten you. If this message encouraged you, comment below. God is still working. And if you know someone walking through a silent season right now, share this video with them. Because sometimes the reminder people need most is this: God may seem silent, but He is never absent.